in your countries. So, and as you know, I'm not going to go into the whole social...
These lecture series provide an opportunity for our staff and students to hear from high-profile individuals. Mr. Bugajski is a senior fellow at the Center for European Policy and Analysis in Washington, D.C., and a host of
shutdown for financial reasons. But if there's no government functioning here, laws aren't passed, reforms. They're looking outside the election process. And this becomes quite dangerous. Coloured revolutions. Now, they were revolutions that were basically protesting or anti-democratic protest. And this is where it becomes dangerous to both particularly blue-collar workers, but even amongst white-collar workers. You know, other populations that are said to be responsible for the problems of that country. Start a very brutal war, which affected probably Kosovo more than any other country in the region, and what they would see as their ethnic kindred. Secondly, Bulgaria. Bulgaria has a long relation ethnic group, or sub-ethnic group. And then, of course, it gets even used as a scapegoat by certain political parties to try and appeal to our administration. It opens the ground to periodic provocations, as we've seen with the train, we've seen with the arrest of former KLA fighters, we've seen with building walls in Mitrovica and so forth. In other words, the longer you keep this issue alive, the more you attract nationalists and other radicals to the cause. To the cause not only of rejecting Kosovo's independence, but to the cause internationally, but also to the cause of creating conflicts. There's also a problem for Montenegro, because a lot of Serb nationalists do not accept the permanent independence of a Montenegrin state. And we saw where this led to most recently with the coup attempt in October, for which we now have hard evidence that it was the case. We thought a few years ago, mistakenly, I don't know if you remember the famous phrase in Iraq, mission accomplished. In other words, everything's been completed regarding former Yugoslavia. Everything's been completed. This is from the American perspective. The war's been finished. The last of the new states after Kosovo's independence have been created, been allowed to form. And now we can leave a very small military presence and basically withdraw from the region. Diplomatically, we can also withdraw, or let's say scale down our involvement, particularly because the European Union is going to handle the question of integration, reform, economic development, investment and so forth. And America will play, the United States will play basically a secondary role, a supportive role when needed, but basically a secondary role. We have a similar situation, although I'll come back to this in a minute, in Macedonia, with the blocking of the bi-ethnic Macedonian-Albanian government by President Ivanov. We'll see how things develop. I hear actually today that Mr. Jafari, the newly elected Speaker of the House, was allowed to use his office in Parliament, and that's a good sign. It shows that some American persuasion by our Deputy Assistant Secretary of State this weekend may have helped, or last weekend may have helped to unblock things. But we'll see. It's still a very unsteady situation. The more the people are disillusioned with their government, the more the disillusioned with the economy, I think, was signed in Tirana, which means that the Macedonians can now claim this is Tirana platform. That's what they call it. In other words, this was deliberately Macedonia, and the outgoing Vimero government is accusing this new coalition that's been put together by Mr. Zaev in Portugal, southern Italy, Greece. There are often hospitals, roads, schools, other buildings. Even though some countries have been trying to get out of the European Union, it's almost, if you think of it as a sausage factory, if you go through it, Britain at the other side wants to get out, it thinks it can do better outside Europe.